Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When I bought 8 acres of rocky wilderness, people called me crazy. Off-grid, no neighbors, no rules, that was the dream. Then came the HOA, fake maps, legal threats. A woman named Karen, they tried to take my land. They picked the wrong man. Here's how I buried their empire. When I first bought the land, people thought I was crazy. 8 acres of undeveloped rocky terrain in the foothills of Larimer County, Colorado, with no water hookup, no sewer, no internet, and not a neighbor in sight, at least not for a mile or two. But that was exactly the point. After 2 decades working in Denver's corporate telecom jungle, surrounded by concrete, office politics, and forced potlucks, I was done with humanity in large doses. Give me silence, solar panels, and a well I drilled with my own 2 hands. I didn't want a cul-de-sac. I wanted control. I built the house myself, or most of it anyway. Hired a local crew to pour the foundation and frame it up, but everything else I touched personally. Passive solar design, insulated concrete forms, radiant heating, satellite internet, buried fiber optic line when Starlink proved too unreliable, and a rain catchment system for backup. 2 years of planning, 6 months of construction, and I finally had what I came for. Autonomy. My property was not inside any subdivision, district, or HOA. It was raw, deeded land with clear recorded title and no encumbrances. I had the kind of peace you can't buy in the city. That was before Pine Canyon Ridge HOA started sniffing around. They weren't there when I bought the place. The nearest tract of homes was over 2 miles away. But slowly, like a suburban tumor, they began to spread. It started with a developer buying up old farmland just west of me, raising it to build a planned residential enclave of beige boxes with vinyl siding and matching mailboxes. I didn't care, not my business. But then they annexed a second plot to the north, and that got a little too close. I started getting letters, thinly veiled invitations at first. Join the community, participate in beautification. Improve property value. I tossed them. Then came stronger ones. Non-compliance with architectural norms may result in review. Review by who? I wondered, while flipping them off from my recliner. The letters stopped for a while, then changed tone entirely. They began to arrive certified, with HOA letterhead, and the signature of one Karen Nelson, president of the Pine Canyon Ridge Homeowners Association. If you've never heard of Karen, count yourself lucky. She's the kind of woman who'd cite bylaws during a wedding toast. Her reputation for aggressive policy enforcement was well known, even outside her precious community. She once fined a homeowner for using the wrong shade of white for Christmas lights. That level of psychotic control only flourishes where people let it. I didn't. When Karen first emailed me directly, she sounded cordial enough. She understood I might not be aware that my land was now adjacent to a planned HOA boundary and that future connectivity may require cooperative integration. I responded with a very polite 2-sentence email. My property is not, has never been, and will never be part of Pine Canyon Ridge. Any attempt to assert authority over it will be met with legal response. She replied with a PDF attachment titled HOA Expansion Roadmap 2025, where, I shit you not, my land was labeled as Future Civic Integration Zone. I sent it to my attorney with a laughing emoji. He wasn't laughing. She's laying groundwork, he said. It's soft pressure now, but she's going to escalate. Get ahead of it. I beefed up the perimeter, steel fencing, motion sensors, and a new camera system that logged every vehicle within 100 feet. I posted signs at the entrance. Private property, no access without written consent. I even installed a custom-built steel gate across the one gravel road leading into my land, heavy enough to stop a truck, rigged with a keypad and remote lock. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Exactly 3 weeks after I ignored Karen's last email, I received a thick, cream-colored envelope in my mailbox, hand-delivered, not mailed. The Pine Canyon Ridge HOA logo was embossed on the flap. Inside was a printed letter on official-looking stationery. The tone was legalistic, smug, and deeply idiotic. Dear neighbor, it began. Due to the scheduled expansion of Pine Canyon Ridge effective tomorrow, your parcel will be officially considered part of the HOA jurisdictional zone. Your property is now within the scope of our protected access region, and in accordance with updated community standards, we are requiring the immediate removal of all access restrictions, gates, locks, and signage, and the granting of access to the internal gravel roadway and the western border path for HOA inspection and future development planning. It concluded with a threat. Failure to comply may result in administrative fines, asset seizure, and the removal of unauthorized barriers. I read it twice, then laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. It was pure delusion wrapped in legal cosplay. They didn't have the authority to annex my land, and certainly not without my consent or a zoning vote, which hadn't happened, or so I thought, but the last line stayed with me. Asset seizure. That wasn't some bored HOA drone typing up fantasy rules. That was someone who thought they had power. Karen had decided to go full authoritarian, and that meant it was time for me to stop laughing and start preparing. I didn't respond to the letter, not because I didn't know what to say, but because responding would have implied it deserved one. Instead, I treated it the way you treat a rattlesnake on your porch. You don't argue with it. You quietly make sure it can't bite you. That same evening, I switched my property into what I half-jokingly called storm mode. All perimeter cameras were updated with new encryption keys, and cloud backups routed through a secondary server. Motion sensors were recalibrated to trigger earlier, further out from the fence line. The gate keypad codes were wiped and replaced with rotating access logic, something I'd originally designed for telecom relay stations, not suburban wars. I added 2 more warning signs near the western tree line where the terrain dipped and access was easier if someone felt creative. The signs weren't dramatic, just factual. Private land, no access, violators prosecuted. I'd learned a long time ago that calm language scared people more than threats. The next morning, I drove straight to the Larimer County Recorder's office. I didn't call ahead. I didn't send my lawyer. I wanted to hear it from the source, face to face, fluorescent lights and all. I handed over my parcel number and asked a simple question. Had there been any zoning changes, annexations, or HOA inclusions affecting my land? The clerk, a woman who looked like she'd survived 3 decades of property disputes and hated all of them equally, typed for a while, frowned at her screen, then shook her head. No changes. Your parcel's still unincorporated. No HOA. No overlays. No pending actions. I asked her to print it. She did, stamped it, signed it. I asked if there were any proposed changes filed but not yet processed. She checked again, slower this time. Nothing. Clean record. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Before leaving, I asked for copies of recent zoning maps related to Pine Canyon Ridge. I didn't need them. I already knew my boundaries, but something about Karen's confidence bothered me. People bluff all the time. She hadn't sounded like she was bluffing. The clerk printed a stack of maps and slid them across the counter. I thanked her, drove home, and spread them across my kitchen table like I was planning an invasion. That's when I saw it. One of the maps, dated just a few weeks back, showed a faint, almost casual line where my western boundary should have been. The line curved inward, subtle enough that anyone not intimately familiar with the land would miss it. According to that version, a narrow strip of my property now sat inside what was labeled Future HOA Development Corridor. No parcel number, no recorded easement, just a line and a legend that didn't exist on any officially filed version. It was sloppy. And it was intentional. I called a local land surveyor I'd worked with during construction, an old-school guy named Ron who trusted measurements more than people. I sent him the map. He called me back an hour later. "That line doesn't exist," he said. "It's not just wrong. It's hand-adjusted. Whoever did this didn't use county GIS data. They modified a base map manually." That's when it stopped being annoying and started being interesting. I scanned the letter Karen had sent again. The wording was careful, but not careful enough. Scheduled expansion. Effective tomorrow. No references. No case numbers. No ordinance citations. Just assertions, written like facts because she assumed no one would challenge them. I forwarded everything to my attorney. The letter, the official county confirmation, the altered map, and Ron's notes. His response was short. "This is fraud," he wrote. "Don't engage them directly. Let them make the next move." So I waited. 2 days later, my neighbor down the dirt road stopped by. He didn't come in, just leaned against his truck, uncomfortable. He asked if I was really blocking the park. I told him there was no park. He said he'd heard otherwise. Flyers were circulating near the school. Something about a community green space being delayed because of a private landowner refusing cooperation. That was the moment I realized Karen wasn't just coming after my gate. She was coming after my reputation. I watched the sun drop behind the ridge that evening, cameras humming quietly, gate locked solid. Somewhere between those trees, someone had decided my land was an obstacle instead of a boundary. And judging by the noise starting to ripple outward, they weren't planning to back down quietly. I was out back that morning, patching up the northeast fence line where an elk had crashed through a few nights earlier. The damage wasn't major, just a bent post and some wire to replace, but it gave me an excuse to breathe mountain air and listen to something besides the low hum of paranoia. The whole week had felt like a countdown. No new letters, no visits. Just an eerie quiet from Karen and her HOA crew, like the silence you get when a predator's already leapt and you're too slow to notice. That silence broke around 8:30 a.m. I was halfway through hammering a brace into the new post when the camera notification pinged my phone. Motion detected at the front gate. I checked the live feed. There she was, Karen Nelson, flanked by two men in high-vis vests, standing 10 feet from my steel gate with a goddamn tripod and what looked like a rented piece of surveying equipment. One of the men was jotting notes on a clipboard. The other scanned the treetops like my 8 acres of scrub oak were concealing enemy snipers. I didn't go out there. I didn't have to. I tapped into the speaker system wired to the gate's motion sensor. My voice came through clean and even. This is private land. You are not authorized to enter. Under Colorado Revised Statute 18-9-110, your presence constitutes first-degree trespass. You are being recorded. Karen didn't flinch. She turned toward the camera, lips pressed tight, arms folded like she was about to give a TED Talk on hostile takeovers. One of the men muttered something and adjusted the tripod. Then she spoke, loud enough for the mic to catch every word. This is an official boundary verification exercise in preparation for Pine Canyon Ridge community improvements. You are legally obligated to provide access under revised planning protocols. Which was bullshit. All of it. No such planning protocols existed, and no court had issued any order. But the camera caught her saying it. That was enough for now. I didn't respond. I just let the silence hang there until they backed off. After 15 minutes of awkward gesturing and pretending to measure things they had no right to touch, they packed up and left. I saved the footage to 3 separate drives and 1 cloud backup. I thought maybe that was their version of a scare tactic, a little intimidation theater. I was wrong. Later that afternoon, I reviewed the rest of the perimeter camera footage. I almost didn't check the western line. It was the most difficult part of my property to reach. Dense underbrush, no clear footpath, and a steep grade that turned to mud after even light rain. But something felt off. At exactly 10:17 a.m., the treeline motion sensor triggered. I fast-forwarded to the feed, and there she was again. Karen. Alone this time. Not at the gate, not on the road, but inside my property. She'd come in from the ridge side, on foot, carrying a tablet and a measuring tape, looking every bit the land thief LARPing as a city planner. She stepped a full 20 yards past the property line, planted a small orange flag into the dirt, and pulled out her phone. Then she looked straight into the nearby pine tree where I'd hidden one of the smaller trail cams. She smiled. I could feel my jaw tightening as I paused the frame. There was no question. She knew she was on private land. She wanted me to know she knew. This wasn't just about shifting a boundary. This was Karen declaring she could walk onto my land, plant her stupid flag, and dare me to do something about it. So I did. I compiled the footage, her arrival at the gate with the survey crew, the false statements about legal obligations, the moment she crossed onto my property alone. I wrote up a statement of events, attached annotated screenshots, and sent the full package to 3 places: the Larimer County District Attorney's Office, the Colorado Association of Property Owners, and my lawyer. I didn't send it to Karen. I wanted her to feel safe for a little while longer. That night, while reviewing the video for a second time, I noticed something else. A white SUV had dropped her off just out of frame and idled for about 10 minutes before pulling away. The plates were partially visible. I ran them through a public records tool I'd kept from my old telecom days. The car belonged to a company called Rock Ridge Planning Solutions, a firm with ties to HOA development contracts throughout the state. This wasn't a rogue neighbor making trouble. This was a coordinated move, and it wasn't going to stop unless I made it. You don't pick a fight with someone like Karen Nelson by shouting louder. That's her battlefield. Noise, posturing, fake confidence layered over fake legalese. No, you fight her with silence, with paper, with methodical escalation. You document, you wait, and when she overreaches, you hand her the shovel and let her dig. I spent the next day compiling everything: timestamps, satellite overlays, property line coordinates, the revised county zoning map versus the fake one Karen used, full resolution video stills, and Ron's technical notes about the manual boundary. Tampering. I packaged it like a war dossier. 2 USB drives, a printed summary, and a notarized affidavit outlining the sequence of events. I dropped one copy off at my attorney's office and mailed the other directly to the Larimer County District Attorney. Not email. Hard copy, signature required. You don't let evidence like that float around in some bureaucrat's inbox. But that wasn't the only move I made. Karen had crossed into my land, lied about legal rights, altered zoning documents, and tried to force her HOA's jurisdiction onto a property it had no legal access to. That was trespass, fraud, abuse of process, and more importantly, it was leverage. I knew she expected me to respond emotionally, to scream, to threaten, to pound my fists and act like the difficult neighbor in her planned narrative. I didn't. I stayed quiet. And while I did, she started speaking for me. 2 days after submitting the legal package, I started hearing things. My neighbor Clay, quiet guy, raises chickens, drinks beer before noon, stopped by and asked if I was really going to block the park for the kids. I blinked at him. What park? The one HOA's building. Karen says they can't finish it unless you let them through. The hell they couldn't. There was no permit, no funding, no plan submitted to the county that involved my property. I asked Clay where he heard that, and he shrugged. Flyer, mailbox, school too, I think. I asked him to bring me a copy if he saw another. He didn't need to. That afternoon, I found one taped to the stop sign at the intersection half a mile down from my gate. Bright green, HOA logo in the corner. At the top, help us build a better future. The rest was more aggressive. Due to resistance from a private landowner blocking safe trail access, our new public park for the Pine Canyon Ridge community has been delayed. This park will offer safe, eco-friendly recreation space for local families. You can help by contacting your county planning board and asking for cooperation enforcement. Below that was a stock photo of laughing children and a QR code linking to a site titled Open Access Now. It was slick, professionally designed, and entirely fictional. There was no park plan, no trail, no permits, and certainly no cooperation enforcement mechanism. The site was a propaganda machine. It even had a fake comment section with glowing praise from concerned residents, likely AI-generated nonsense with usernames like Mountain Mom and Justice Pine. It was a classic move. Flip the script, paint yourself as the community advocate, frame your opponent as the selfish outlier. Unfortunately for her, I'd worked in communications for over 20 years. I knew propaganda when I saw it, and I knew how to kill it. That night, I launched a site of my own. Registered the domain, My Land, My Rules. Plain, factual, and aggressive without being hysterical. I uploaded video footage of Karen trespassing, side-by-side maps showing the doctored boundary, an embedded PDF of the DA report submission, and my notarized land title showing 0 HOA involvement. At the top, in bold black text, this land is not for sale, not for seizure, and definitely not part of your beige nightmare. Within 24 hours, the site hit 10,000 views. Someone cross-posted it on Reddit under r/HOA nightmares. Then it hit TikTok. A young woman in Boulder narrated the trespassing footage over a sarcastic voiceover and dubbed Karen the HOA Queen of Entitlement Mountain. 500,000 views in one day. By the weekend, I was giving an interview to a local podcaster who ran a show called Off Grid and Armed. I didn't rant, I didn't accuse. I explained the facts, calm, boring, unimpeachable, and that's what made it powerful. Meanwhile, my lawyer was already making calls. He filed a formal cease and desist against the Pine Canyon Ridge HOA for defamation and harassment. He also began preparing a restraining order against Karen specifically, citing repeated trespass, targeted intimidation, and the use of falsified documents in public-facing campaigns. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. On Monday morning, I received an anonymous email through the contact form on My Land, My Rules. No name, no return address, just a single sentence. Check the Rockridge contract filings. Look at the planning firm she used before. Attached was a ZIP file. I scanned it twice for malware, opened it in a sandboxed environment, and found a cache of documents, contracts, zoning applications, invoices, all connected to Rockridge Planning Solutions, the same firm whose SUV I'd caught on camera during Karen's solo trespass. But the best part wasn't in the files. It was in the metadata. Several of the documents had been authored by someone named K.J. Jensen. Karen J. Jensen. It took me 5 minutes to find the rest. Karen Nelson hadn't always been Karen Nelson. 10 years earlier, she'd worked in Arizona as Karen Jensen, a mid-level official in the Tucson Department of Urban Planning. She was terminated for zoning irregularities tied to suspicious land use changes that benefited a private developer she had failed to disclose familial ties to. That incident had quietly settled. No charges, no coverage. Just a pink slip and a name change. Until now. I sent the documents to my lawyer. His reply came 20 minutes later. This just became criminal, and she just lost her war. The courthouse was colder than it needed to be. Industrial lighting, government-grade carpeting, and that faint smell of old paper and disinfectant. I sat beside my attorney, Ben Marlowe, mid-40s, ex-Marine turned property rights litigator with a smile like a wood chipper and a voice that made judges sit up straighter. Across the aisle, Karen Nelson looked like she was posing for a real estate brochure. Blazer too tight, posture too perfect, not a single gray hair out of place. She smiled like she thought this was already in the bag. It wasn't. This was the preliminary hearing. Just a motion to dismiss on her side, a temporary injunction on ours. But the air had weight. Karen wasn't just defending her HOA nonsense anymore. She was now orbiting the edge of real criminal exposure, and somewhere in her bones, I think she knew it. The judge was a seasoned woman named Margot Lister. She didn't tolerate performative bullshit. When Karen's attorney, a smug younger guy with shiny loafers and a voice 2 octaves higher than it needed to be, started blathering about implied jurisdiction and communal access necessity, she cut him off with a raised hand. Mr. Pearson, is the defendant prepared to provide documented evidence that Mr. Vincent's property falls under Pine Canyon Ridge jurisdiction? He hesitated. Karen leaned in and whispered something. Pearson cleared his throat. We do have a boundary map, Your Honor. Submit it. He did, printed in full color, the same fake map I'd already exposed. Judge Lister took a moment to examine it, holding it against the actual county zoning map my lawyer submitted right after. Then she looked up. This is not a recorded map. There is no official overlay confirming this boundary. Mr. Marlowe, do you have expert verification of your copy? Ben stood like a mountain. Yes, Your Honor, certified by Larimer County Recorder's Office. We also have a notarized statement from a licensed surveyor confirming this document. He tapped our map, is accurate, and that the other, he nodded toward Karen's, is falsified. The judge didn't blink. She just turned back to Pearson. Do you wish to contest the surveyor's certification? Pearson opened his mouth, closed it. Then, to everyone's surprise, Karen leaned forward, stood up, and addressed the court directly. Your Honor, this whole dispute is a misunderstanding. My intention was to ensure that public access wasn't unfairly blocked by one individual. I may have misunderstood the zoning adjustments, but my actions were in good faith. Ben didn't wait for the judge. Your Honor, may I remind the court that Mrs. Nelson personally entered my client's private property without consent, staked a false boundary marker, and made recorded verbal claims to legal authority she did not possess. This was not a misunderstanding. This was willful trespass paired with document falsification. Judge Lister's eyes narrowed slightly. Mrs. Nelson, did you knowingly enter Mr. Vincent's land? Karen hesitated for the first time. I believed it to be within the HOA's boundary, based on information provided by our planning consultant. Ben took that opportunity like a lion seeing an open throat. And, Your Honor, we have reason to believe that the so-called planning consultant, Rockridge Planning Solutions, has a prior working relationship with Mrs. Nelson from out of state. Furthermore, documentation suggests that she has previously operated under a different legal name and was terminated from a public zoning position in Arizona under suspicion of similar misconduct. That silenced the room. The judge leaned back. Is that documented, Mr. Marlowe? It is. We have notarized proof and matching authoring signatures from Ms. Nelson, formerly Karen Jensen. Pearson jumped in then, visibly rattled. Objection, Your Honor. This is character assassination. "Sustained," Judge Lister said, but her voice had changed, cooler now, watching Karen like she was something under glass. "I'll determine whether this information is relevant at trial. For now, we stay focused on the matter at hand." The ruling that day was small but significant. Karen's motion to dismiss was denied. Our injunction was granted. She and her HOA were barred from making any further claims about my property, physically entering it, or disseminating any materials referencing it as part of their jurisdiction. Violations would carry fines and potential contempt charges. We walked out of that courtroom with no chest thumping or high fives, just the calm satisfaction of knowing the house of cards was tilting. But things weren't done. Not even close. 2 nights later, I got a knock at my door. I almost didn't answer it. I don't like unannounced visitors, especially after sunset, but the knock came soft, hesitant, not HOA style. I opened the door to find a young guy in a windbreaker, early 30s maybe, holding a manila envelope like it was ticking. "Are you Milo Vincent?" "Who's asking?" "I used to work with Karen," he said. I don't want to be part of this anymore." He handed me the envelope and walked off before I could ask his name. Inside were copies of internal HOA emails. Dozens. One thread, dated 4 months earlier, from Karen to Rockridge Planning, read, "We need that corridor line adjusted. Doesn't have to be perfect, just enough to make him look obstructive. He's the last domino." Another email, this time to the HOA board. "If we can push this through, I'll have the planning seat in 2 years. He's off-grid. He doesn't vote. He's expendable." That was the real Karen Nelson. Not the neighborhood organizer, the chess player, the one who didn't just want my land. She wanted leverage. She was building a kingdom, and I was an inconvenient castle in the middle of her empire. And now I had proof. They always look stronger from the outside. HOAs, governments, corporations, any institution that wraps itself in bureaucracy. But it only takes one crack, one leak. And when the dam breaks, it doesn't trickle. It roars. The leaked emails were more than incriminating. They were an open confession of intent. Karen had not only ordered the falsification of a property line, she'd done it to secure political leverage. She planned to use my land dispute to rally her community, pressure the zoning board, and eventually launch herself into a seat on the county planning commission. It wasn't just fraud, it was strategy. A long con built on the assumption that no one would dare push back. Until now. My attorney forwarded the entire packet to the district attorney, along with a formal request to expand the investigation into conspiracy to defraud. By then, the DA's office already had their own copy. Someone inside the HOA had beat us to the punch. Turns out the guy who dropped the envelope on my doorstep wasn't the only board member who wanted off Karen's sinking ship. 2 more whistleblowers stepped forward by the end of the week. They confirmed that the HOA board had voted, informally, off the books to support Karen's plan, knowing full well the map was doctored. One of them turned over a voice memo from a board meeting held in Karen's living room. "If we get the access corridor approved, we can spin it as a green initiative. The county loves that crap. Milo Vincent doesn't even use the land. It's just scrub and rocks. If we make him look like the villain, people won't care what we did to get it." The investigation hit local news first. Then it went statewide. KR9 Colorado ran the headline, "HOA accused of land grab scheme. Homeowner fights back with evidence." I was interviewed on the evening segment. Once again, calm, clean, no anger. I laid out the facts. I made no threats. I didn't need to. The reporters did it for me. They aired side-by-side maps, before and after overlays, showing how Karen's team had digitally curved my boundary. They played the clip of her staking my property with an orange flag and smiling into the hidden trail, cam like she was planting a flag on the goddamn moon. Then came the deeper cut. One of the investigative journalists dug up the Arizona records. Not just the termination paperwork, but internal emails from her time in Tucson's urban planning office, leaked by someone with a grudge and a long memory. The emails suggested Karen, then Karen Jensen, had engaged in coordinated boundary negotiations with a developer who turned out to be her brother-in-law. The same name appeared on donor records for Pine Canyon Ridge's founding developer. That broke the story wide open. Karen tried to control the fallout. She issued a statement through the HOA website denying all wrongdoing, blaming unfounded accusations driven by anti-community sentiment, and claiming the email leak was a malicious fabrication. No one bought it, not even her own board. The next day, 3 board members resigned. The HOA's legal counsel stepped down due to ethical conflicts. Their insurance carrier suspended coverage, citing active investigation risk. And then, finally, the state got involved. The Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies launched a formal inquiry into Pine Canyon Ridge HOA for violations of civil code, misuse of organizational authority, and fraudulent land use manipulation. That alone would have been enough to implode most HOAs. But Karen wasn't just under administrative review. She was now the subject of a criminal investigation. I watched it unfold from my porch. Neighbors I'd never spoken to before started showing up, not to yell or protest, but to apologize. A mother and her teenage daughter brought homemade bread and said, "We were told you were some angry prepper hoarding land, but we watched the footage. You were just minding your business." I nodded. I didn't need a parade, but it was something. Even Clay, the chicken guy, came by and offered me a 6-pack. "Guess I owe you a beer," he muttered. I took it. The best part, I didn't have to lift another finger. Everything I'd set in motion, the paper trail, the footage, the exposure, it was now driving itself. Karen's empire was collapsing under the weight of its own deceit. I had no doubt she'd try to claw her way out of it. Maybe blame her consultants, maybe claim ignorance. But her emails, her voice on tape, her face on camera trespassing, none of that was deniable. Then came the cherry on top. The state audit of Pine Canyon Ridge's financials revealed something no one had expected. 2 prior land disputes, quiet ones, had ended with small buyouts and NDA agreements. One involved a retired couple who'd sold their 5-acre property for half its value after HOA pressure. Another was a disabled vet who'd moved out abruptly after receiving citations for incompatible landscaping. In both cases, the HOA had filed boundary adjustments suspiciously similar to mine. Karen hadn't just made a mistake with me, she'd made a habit. The press dubbed it a pattern of organized territorial fraud. The governor's office issued a statement condemning predatory overreach by unregulated homeowners associations and promised legislative review. And somewhere in that mess of headlines and resignations and subpoenas, I stood still. Same boots, same land, same gate. The one they said would have to come down by morning. It was still standing, and now it was stronger than ever. By the time the grand jury was convened, I'd stopped keeping track of how many government acronyms had visited my property. Dora, the DA's office, even a rep from the state attorney general's fraud division, all of them had either called, emailed, or sent someone in a gray sedan with a clipboard and a vague badge to ask questions, photograph boundaries, or verify records. I gave them coffee and full access. I had nothing to hide. Karen, on the other hand, was running out of places to hide. The charges started stacking like bricks. First came the obvious ones: first-degree trespass, document falsification, attempted fraud in zoning declarations. Then it got nastier: conspiracy to commit fraud, abuse of regulatory authority, and, most damning, racketeering under state-level RICO statutes, because now it wasn't just about my land. The 2 other homeowners who'd been squeezed into silence came forward, emboldened by the chaos. Both had been coerced, threatened with baseless fines, and ultimately signed over property adjustments they didn't understand under pressure. They wanted those agreements voided. Their lawyers moved fast. Mine did too. Ben Marlowe filed a civil suit for damages seeking compensation for trespass, legal harassment, defamation, and attempted property theft. The total claim? $210,000. Not inflated, just documented losses, legal fees, and compensation for the 3 months of siege. Karen responded by requesting the court dismiss the suit, claiming the HOA had acted in good faith and that she was being singled out due to personal vendetta. The judge didn't even blink before denying her motion. Then came her own criminal arraignment. The courtroom was packed, cameras at the back, reporters scribbling with the same bloodlust they once reserved for local election scandals. Karen showed up with her attorney and a forced smile, like this was just another tedious formality. But when the prosecutor read the charges aloud, 6 counts, including attempted fraudulent seizure of private land, her expression cracked for the first time. The court denied bail modification. She wasn't going home that day. Meanwhile, the HOA board tried to spin it. A press release went up on their website claiming they had been misled by internal leadership and were committed to rebuilding trust with the community. But no one cared. Their membership was down by almost 50%. Several residents had filed motions to terminate the HOA entirely. Others were petitioning the county to dissolve the subdivision's charter. It was chaos wrapped in khaki suburban misery. Ben and I weren't celebrating. Not yet. We still had court. At the first hearing for the civil suit, Ben walked the court through the entire timeline. He presented the trespass footage, the fake zoning map versus the real one, the email chains ordering the boundary manipulation, the voice memo from the secret HOA board meeting, the contract metadata linking Karen to Rockridge Planning Solutions, and finally, the leaked documents from Tucson showing Karen's previous misconduct. Her attorney didn't even try to deny most of it. Instead, they leaned hard on procedural language, errors in judgment, lack of regulatory clarity, community miscommunication. Ben cut through it with surgical calm. This wasn't miscommunication. This was organized coercion using HOA authority as a weapon. My client was not a member of this association, yet was targeted with manufactured documents, public defamation, and direct property invasion. The judge nodded slowly. He looked tired. He also looked furious. Then came the most satisfying moment of the day. The judge turned to Karen and said, "This court finds the evidence overwhelmingly supports Mr. Vincent's claims. The defendant not only trespassed, but led a calculated effort to mislead public entities, falsify legal boundaries, and coerce community pressure in pursuit of personal gain. Damages are awarded in full." That was it. $210,000 awarded to me, paid jointly by Karen and the HOA's remaining board. Outside the courthouse, someone from a local news affiliate tried to shove a mic in my face. "Do you feel vindicated?" I just smiled and said, "I feel like I'm going home. That's enough." But it wasn't over, because 2 days later, Karen was officially indicted. The DA's office filed their final charges. 7 years maximum sentence recommended. The RICO angle had stuck, mostly because of the cross-state history and financial gain motive. The community began unraveling after that. The HOA couldn't pay its debts. Their insurance had pulled coverage. 3 of their board members lawyered up and quietly disappeared from public view. The HOA's bank account was frozen pending a forensic audit. Residents began filing to remove deed restrictions one by one, and the county launched a review of HOA registration policies statewide. The system that tried to absorb my land, it was being dismantled piece by piece by the very institutions it had tried to manipulate. And all I'd done was hold the line. It rained the morning the demolition crew arrived. Nothing dramatic, just a slow, steady drizzle that turned the gravel road to soft mud and left streaks across the sides of the trucks. I stood at the edge of my driveway, coffee in hand, watching them tear down the old HOA signage at the intersection a half-mile south of my gate. The bold blue letters, "Welcome to Pine Canyon Ridge, a protected community," were the first to go. Behind the trucks followed a county vehicle. Not code enforcement this time, but a land assessor come to document the removal of jurisdictional designations. The HOA was being dissolved. Not just suspended, not restructured, dissolved entirely under community vote and administrative action. What was once a sprawling suburban experiment had collapsed into its own mess of fraud, legal overreach, and public disgust. The homeowners had won their own form of freedom, though not all of them knew what to do with it. Some houses were up for sale. Others put up new fences. One neighbor, bless his heart, immediately repainted his house a violent neon green just because he could. Clay the chicken guy. He stopped by with another six-pack and said he was thinking of planting pot now that there's no HOA to tell him not to. I told him to check state law first. He said, "That's your job, smart guy." But none of it touched my land. Because now my property had its own designation. The county, in a rare act of political clarity, issued an official declaration of private exclusionary reserve status, a legal classification that confirmed I could not be included in any zoning or association jurisdiction without express consent in writing, filed, and notarized. In plain terms, they couldn't try this again. Not in 10 years, not in 20, not with a new HOA or a city ordinance or a county annexation plan. It was over, officially. Karen, meanwhile, had vanished from public life. Her house was listed under a trust now. Rumors said she took a plea deal, exchanged a reduced sentence for full cooperation and testimony against the remaining board members. Last I heard, she was barred from working in any zoning, development, or planning capacity for life. Ben, my attorney, sent me a final invoice along with a handwritten note. "You're the most stubborn client I've ever had. Don't change." I framed it. And as for the gate, I built a new one, welded it myself. Industrial steel, hydraulic swing arm, solar backup. I even added a new feature, a sign laser-cut, powder-coated black with white lettering that read, "Private property, no HOA allowed ever." It wasn't for show, it wasn't for threat. It was history, a line in the dirt that had held when no one thought it would. Sometimes I walked the western edge of my land in the evenings, past the place where Karen had staked her little orange flag, now long gone. The trees had grown thicker. A deer trail had opened up just beyond the ridge. It was quiet again, not empty, not abandoned, just mine. And for the first time in months, I realized that was all I'd ever wanted.